Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? I've got a book request for you guys instead of a book review. Over the weekend, I didn't post any videos because I was in Dallas with my family. Not with the wife and the little Grahams, but my brothers and my mom flew into town. And my mom pointed out, or maybe it was my brother, I can't remember, that this was the first time that we had all been together since my sister died in 2019. And like that had never clicked with me because I'd gotten together with my brothers a couple of times. We all live in different states, and my mom had seen them all, but like it hadn't been all four of us together. And I feel like it was kind of a shame. It had been 5.5 years since we did that. It's just kind of the way life went. But had a grand old time, and I fiddled around with social media just a little bit here and there. I posted a couple of pictures, but mainly it was just about seeing some sights, being present, as they say. And even once we got done with the tourism, we went back to the place we were staying and just crashed and were lazy. I got some writing done, played some card games, watched some movies. It's nice. I'm glad we were able to do all that. I've been listening to an audiobook for the last week or so, and I'm just not getting into it, so I'm going to hit pause on that. It's it's a biography of Caesar Augustus by Adrian Goldsworthy. He's a historian of ancient Rome. And as much as I want to know about that subject, I'm just struggling to be interested in it right now. And instead, I keep thinking about this Warhammer book that I want to read. So I'm going to read that instead, do the audiobook of that one. But as far as the print request that I want, I'm looking for a really good book on JFK. I want a nonfiction about JFK, about his life, and obviously a significant amount of the interest of that is going to be what's the truth around what happened, re his assassination. But here's the thing: I went and did a search for JFK books, and the three biggest that came back were not by people whose books I wanted to read. Let me elaborate. Two of them were nonfiction. One of them was a novelization. The novelization was 11/22/63 by Stephen King. And I'm not a Stephen King fan. I've read a couple of his books. I will say that I might eventually like to read this book of his in particular. I've read his book on writing, and I have read Shawshank Redemption. I feel like there's maybe one or two more that I've dabbled in. It's not that I'm like against Stephen King. He writes these big paving stone books, and I've got plenty of friends who are big fans of his work. I've just never gotten into it. Like, yeah, he's a lefty lib and he's anti-gun and like whatever. I could give a wooden piss about that. Like, I just don't get into his books. The subject matter of this one is of interest to me, but it's not the kind of book that I would want to read as like a main starting intro JFK book. The other two were by Chris Matthews and Bill O'Reilly, who are two news pundits on opposite ends of the spectrum. And I don't want to read a news pundit hack journalist's take on JFK, because I know that the Democrat side is going to be that, like, oh, JFK was basically the second coming of Jesus, and everything that he would have wanted to do is all the lefty lib stuff that the DNC establishment wants to do today, and so we should honor his memory by just doing it, blah, blah, blah. I do want to know some of the things about JFK's service. I remember seeing an interview once with Chris Matthews where he highlighted some of the extraordinary circumstances of JFK's youth. I guess he was very sick in his youth. He received last rites 3 or 4 times. In the Catholic faith, that's the rites that you receive right before you die because you think you're on death's door. And I'm guessing it's uncommon to receive it that many times. Nevertheless, he was able to recover, and I guess he had some military service. I'm not all that familiar with that. So I would like to know those factlets about it, but I also don't want to read something that pretends to be a nonfiction written by somebody who's really going to puff him up. For as much as I love David McCullough's writing, he is friendly to a fault with his subjects, in that he doesn't really highlight their faults. And if their faults are a fact of historical record, then those need to be included in a neutral assessment of the person. The same thing can be said of a Bill O'Reilly treatment of a JFK book, especially because it's in this series of killing books that Bill O'Reilly has. Killing Patton, killing whatever. Like there's a killing Kennedy book, and while I'm sure that there's going to be some interesting factlets in there, it is also going to have some of Bill O'Reilly's spin and angles and a little bit of conspiracy stuff. I'm perfectly willing to be entertained by conspiracy theories about JFK, but here's the thing. I went to the old book depository while I was in Dallas. My family and I, we went to the 6th floor of the building. We saw the exhibits. We saw they've got it paneled off in glass, the room where the shooter is supposed to have shot from. We saw a replica of the rifle. They had fascinating displays that eventually broke it down by the minute, and then by the second, and then by the frame of what happened. We stood on the grassy knoll. I drove in the lane over the X marked in the road where Kennedy was shot. Like it was very moving to experience all of that and to see footage of what that was like for people in the 60s to see the president get shot on the air. I can only imagine how hard it was for Jackie Kennedy to go from riding alongside her husband, the president, to 2 hours later watching LBJ get sworn in, and then she's going to go sit back in Air Force One and hang out with her husband's casket and like really try to reconcile herself to the fact that this is her life now. It's intense, and I want to know more about the man, and I would like an unbiased take on the man. So what this is all coming to is, if you are able to recommend to me a biography that is going to be fair and neutral about JFK, something along the lines of maybe a Ron Chernow biography. I really liked his biography of Hamilton, of Ulysses Grant, and of John Rockefeller. I feel, for example, that he's a writer who is fair about approaching these subjects. I don't think he's done a Kennedy book. It would be great if he did, but long story short, if you were to recommend for me a really great Kennedy biography that isn't by somebody who's trying to sell an angle, but rather just analyzes the facts and writes it well, I would love to hear about it. There was something else that I was going to say. Can't remember much what. But yeah, like that's one thing that I think I'd be interested in reading. Just I know the general gist of it, and I know that there are plenty of ideas about it was LBJ and the CIA, blah blah blah. Like they whacked him so that they could take him out, et cetera, et cetera. This is also significant because just last weekend, while I was in Dallas, or maybe it was a day or two before, Trump signed the executive order declassifying the files on JFK, on his brother, and on Martin Luther King and their assassinations. And so now I'm assuming that the next step is those records go public and people can start combing through them and pouring through them and seeing what it is that's been hidden for so long. I mean, it's been over 60 years since JFK was killed, and he was killed before his brother and before Martin Luther King. So I assume that if it was the government and it was a conspiracy, then anybody involved with it is long gone. So let the people know. So I guess there is a risk of, if I were to read a book about it, then the information in it might become immediately outdated or counter-signaled by something revealed in the declassified files. Nevertheless, I would like to know more. So that is my request for now. I'm going to read that Warhammer book tomorrow. And also, while I was in Dallas, my brother found a samurai display at a museum that we went and checked out, and it was really, really cool. I got some pictures of that. I'll talk more about that in another video. But I checked out of the bookshop, or I swung by the bookshop at the end, and I picked up this book that is The History of Japan in Manga. Not to say that it is a manga of the history of Japan. Well, I guess technically it is, right? Like, it's, hey, let's do the history of Japan, but we'll include pictures and factlets and stuff. Written originally in Japanese, it was translated by Zach Davison, who, if you saw my video about the comics that I like to read, he did some afterwards and some cultural annotations on Jim Zub's Wayward book, which was about a new era of young gods rising up in Japan. Zach Davison is very well versed in Japanese culture. If I remember right, his wife is Japanese. He's studied this a lot. I guess he's lived there, and so he could be a valuable resource to understand all of that. And if he had a hand in translating this to English, I think that'll help with confirming the accuracy of the information. So very excited to read that, especially after reading Shogun last year, and I've got that Miyamoto Musashi book on deck to read this year. Plenty of great books. I'm looking forward to not being such a huge volume reader this year. I'd rather read fewer, better books that I'm going to remember and want to read over and over again. So I'm going to pause what I'm reading in print to read that manga, and I'm going to pause what I'm listening to an audio to read the Warhammer book, and just try to enjoying things. But yeah, let me know about a JFK book. Until next time, drive safe. See you out there.